My name is Yolande Clough. I'm a stage 4 cancer survivor in remission now after reading Jane McLelland's book, How to Starve Cancer Without Starving Yourself. I was diagnosed at stage 1C in May 2018 and after a hysterectomy it was biopsied and found to be a clear cell, which is a particularly aggressive form of ovarian cancer with a very poor prognosis. Mainly because it's not responsive to chemotherapy, it's resistant. So after my research I declined chemotherapy because it was a platinum-based chemotherapy that I was being offered. For the next year I adopted a really healthy lifestyle, cutting out carbs and sugars. Unfortunately it was a keto diet which allows fats, which I later found out with the benefit of Jane's book, are not really good for hormonally driven cancers. When I got to a year clear, I took my foot off the gas, a bit like Jane described in the book. I regret it now, and unfortunately in October of 2019 I got a CA 125 score, which is the test for ovarian cancer. It doubled. So at which point I was sent for a CT scan and it was confirmed that it was back. I had a pelvic tumour of 16mm by 11mm with a vascular line beginning to develop, and I also had metastases to the lungs, numerous small flecks, and then in both lungs basal lesions of 4mm and 5mm. So at this point I was desperate because all they were offering me was palliative chemotherapy, which I knew wouldn't work. It was either that or let the disease progress. After reading Jane's book, I immediately began to collect all of the off-label drugs that I could without prescription, plus the supplements mentioned in the book, and I began to take them. I enrolled at the Care Oncology Clinic as soon as I could, and following Jane's advice, I also looked into hyperbaric oxygen and I decided to hire a chamber for my home use, and I had an hour a day in the chamber. My CA 125 began to drop immediately, even before I started chemotherapy, and I was beginning to be quietly hopeful. On the advice of the Care Oncology Clinic, I starved the cancer for 6 weeks, the press phase, before beginning chemotherapy, which was in January 2020. During that starve press phase, I adopted a really rigorous, strict low glycemic diet, and I stuck to it absolutely. And I also cut out alcohol, as I reasoned that my liver had enough toxicity to cope with without giving it any further problems. After the third round of chemotherapy, I had a midpoint CT scan, and we had astonishing results. The pelvic tumour was resolved and undetectable, and the metastases in the lungs were also resolved and undetectable. I knew from reading the book that clear cell is a particularly aggressive cancer, and Jane says in the book that the more aggressive the cancer, the more aggressive has to be your response to it. So I threw everything at it. I blocked all the feeding pathways simultaneously, whilst also having hyperbaric oxygen, which I reasoned was supporting the healthy cells whilst providing an absolutely toxic environment for the cancer. Jane's synergistic approach in the book outlined where repurposed off-label drugs are used in combination with the traditional medicine of chemotherapy just made such sense to me. To starve and weaken the enemy and then hit it with a kill phase, boom, seemed like such common sense. I joined the Facebook group, Jane McLelland's Off-Label Drugs for Cancer, mainly so that I could benefit from the experience of other people who were going through the same thing as me. And also I found the stories of their successes and outcomes, positive progress, so uplifting. I have recently finished chemotherapy and I'm shortly about to have my next CT scan, so fingers crossed. I owe Jane a huge debt of gratitude. Her life story was an inspiration to me at a time when I had no hope. She is quite literally my lifesaver.